In the heart of Briarwood, a town where every neighbor knows your name and every secret is just a whisper away, the disappearance of Eliza Moore shattered the peace. On a crisp autumn evening in 2012, Eliza, a beloved schoolteacher, vanished without a trace. The town was left grappling with a haunting question: where did she go? Was it an accident? Was it by choice? And why, after all these years, was there no trace of her? Her husband, Caleb Moore, spent years searching, clinging to hope even as the investigation stalled. The police turned up empty-handed, and rumors began to swirl. Some said she'd run away. Others whispered about infidelity. No one could piece together the puzzle of Eliza's sudden disappearance. But in 2022, 10 years later, something unimaginable happened. Caleb, now remarried with a new family, was at a local carnival when he spotted her. Eliza. Alive. But how? And why hadn't she returned to him, or even contacted their children? Why had she disappeared without a word, leaving a trail of unanswered questions? This wasn't just a reunion, it was the start of an unraveling that would expose a dark secret hidden for over a decade. Caleb's life, his marriage, and everything he thought he knew about his past would be upended. The truth, once buried deep, would soon see the light of day. Briarwood, the small town nestled on the outskirts of the bustling city, was a place where everyone knew everyone's business, or at least thought they did. It was a quiet community, the kind of town where children played in the front yards and neighbors waved as they passed. To an outsider, it seemed idyllic, the perfect setting for a family to thrive. Eliza Moore, a 32-year-old schoolteacher, had lived in Briarwood her entire life. Her smile was infectious, and her warm, welcoming nature made her a favorite among her students. She had married Caleb Moore, a local mechanic, just after college, and the two seemed inseparable. Together, they built a life that many envied, a cozy home, 2 beautiful children, and a community that respected them both. Caleb was known as the steady, hard-working husband who always put his family first, while Eliza was the doting mother and teacher who loved making a difference in the lives of others. But beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect life, things were not as idyllic as they appeared. In the years leading up to Eliza's disappearance, there were subtle shifts in their marriage. Caleb's long hours at the shop had caused tension. The once deep connection between husband and wife began to erode, replaced by misunderstandings and unspoken resentments. They fought, like many couples do, but these arguments seemed to linger longer than before, leaving Eliza feeling increasingly isolated. Caleb noticed her growing distance, but he chalked it up to the stress of raising 2 children and teaching full-time. Eliza, on the other hand, had started to feel a gnawing emptiness inside. She loved her family dearly, but something was missing. The happiness she once felt in her marriage now felt like a distant memory. Caleb was always busy, and her social life had dwindled to the point where she rarely went out. The loneliness crept in, but she kept it to herself. She didn't want to burden Caleb with her struggles. He had his own pressures, she reasoned. But there were moments, small and fleeting, that hinted at deeper issues, ones that neither of them knew how to address. Eliza's sudden interest in her family's finances, her increased vigilance in keeping track of Caleb's whereabouts, and her frequent late-night conversations with friends left Caleb feeling uncomfortable, though he never questioned her intentions. Then, in the spring of 2012, Caleb started noticing something more troubling. He found strange documents hidden in Eliza's desk, papers filled with unfamiliar names, amounts of money, and transactions that didn't make sense. When he confronted her, Eliza became defensive, claiming it was just some old financial documents from a project she had been working on. Caleb let it go, assuming it was nothing. But the seed of doubt had been planted. The cracks in their relationship were growing wider, even if they were still invisible to the outside world. And then, on that fateful autumn evening in 2012, Eliza disappeared without a trace. Despite the tragedy, no one could have predicted the extent to which this disappearance would change Caleb's life. As police combed through the town and surrounding areas, the community rallied behind Caleb, offering their support. But even as the investigation grew colder, there was a sense of dread that something more than a simple disappearance had occurred. Something Caleb couldn't quite put his finger on. The following months were filled with heartbreak and confusion. Caleb mourned his wife, but there were whispers in the town that made him uneasy. Some said Eliza had left him for another man. Others suggested she had run away from her responsibilities. But no one truly knew the truth. Yet, behind the veil of grief, Caleb began to notice something even more troubling, the unsettling realization that there were secrets surrounding his wife, secrets he never imagined existed. As the years went by, and Eliza was legally declared dead, Caleb's life seemed to move forward. He remarried, had another family, and tried to move past the pain of the past. But deep down, a small voice gnawed at him, never quite allowing him to let go of the mystery. The dark truth behind Eliza's disappearance was buried in shadows, waiting to resurface. Caleb, in his grief and guilt, couldn't have known that the secrets he would uncover in the years ahead would destroy everything he had rebuilt. The disappearance of Eliza Moore was initially viewed as a missing persons case, the kind of incident that sparked immediate concern but, over time, often fizzled out as authorities struggled to uncover solid leads. The first 48 hours after Eliza's vanishing were crucial, and yet, despite all efforts, the trail quickly grew cold. It was a regular autumn evening on October 12, 2012, when Eliza's disappearance was first reported. She had kissed her children goodnight and told Caleb she was stepping out for a walk to clear her mind. It wasn't unusual for her to take evening strolls, as she often found solace in the quiet of Briarwood suburban streets. Caleb thought little of it at the time. But when hours passed without a word, the worry set in. The next morning, when Eliza had not returned, Caleb called the police. What started as a missing persons report quickly escalated into a full-fledged investigation. Authorities canvassed the neighborhood, spoke to neighbors, and conducted a search of local parks and woodlands, but there was no sign of Eliza. Her car remained parked in the driveway, her purse was still at home, and her phone had gone silent. The police began by questioning Caleb. At first, the distraught husband was cooperative, providing the necessary details for the investigation. He described his wife as the loving, dedicated woman everyone knew her to be. But as hours turned into days, Caleb became the subject of increasing scrutiny. Friends and family members had their doubts about his involvement, though no one voiced these concerns aloud at the time. The investigation shifted when the authorities learned that Eliza had been involved in something far more complicated than a simple disappearance. A neighbor, a young woman named Lisa Harris, came forward with an unsettling observation. Lisa had been walking her dog around the neighborhood on the evening of October 12 when she claimed to have seen a car parked at the end of Eliza Street. The car, a black sedan, had been stationary for quite some time, and a figure was seen standing by it, though Lisa hadn't been able to see the face clearly. Detectives dug deeper into this lead and soon learned that the car was registered under Caleb's name. While it was not enough evidence to implicate him directly, it raised suspicions. This discovery was followed by the revelation that Eliza's phone records had been wiped clean. Forensics teams managed to retrieve a few old messages and call logs, but there were significant gaps, particularly during the time when Eliza had gone missing. The police believed this could be an indication that Eliza had been silenced intentionally. As the days dragged on, media outlets caught wind of the case, and Briarwood, a quiet town known for its peacefulness, was suddenly thrust into the national spotlight. Headlines splashed across newspapers and news sites. Local teacher vanishes without a trace, and mysterious disappearance stuns small town. The public's reaction was a mixture of shock, sympathy, and, unwillingly, suspicion. The pressure mounted on the investigators, and so they turned to Caleb once again. The constant media attention began to take a toll on him. He gave several interviews, insisting that he was doing everything he could to help find his wife. He was a man grieving, but some began to question whether his grief was genuine. Was he hiding something? Was he involved in Eliza's disappearance? The police conducted multiple interrogations with Caleb over the course of the next few months. Caleb's responses were consistent, even as the investigation continued to probe deeper into his personal life. The public perception of him was that of a man who was emotionally distraught yet oddly composed. Still, the questions began to pile up. If Caleb was so devastated, why did he not seem to show any outward signs of distress? Why did he seem so methodical in his responses? Was it possible that Caleb, once seen as a doting husband, was hiding something more sinister? A breakthrough came in the form of a forensic analysis of Caleb's personal finances. It was discovered that Caleb had been struggling with mounting debts, a fact he had kept hidden from his wife. Bank statements revealed large withdrawals made in the weeks leading up to Eliza's disappearance. Some of these transactions were linked to suspicious accounts, and others had no clear explanation. This added another layer of intrigue to the case, suggesting that Caleb might have been involved in activities that were far more illicit than anyone had imagined. Public suspicion of Caleb reached a boiling point, especially after a key witness, a local bartender named Rick, came forward. Rick claimed to have overheard a heated argument between Caleb and Eliza just days before her disappearance. He didn't know the details of the argument, but he described Caleb as visibly angry and Eliza as frightened and defensive. The bartender's testimony became a key piece of the puzzle that painted Caleb in an increasingly suspicious light. Despite these developments, there was no solid proof to arrest Caleb. The authorities were left with a nagging feeling that something was amiss, but the case began to stall. Frustration set in. Public interest waned, and the investigation grew cold. Caleb, exhausted from the ordeal and the public's growing scrutiny, tried to move on with his life. But, as he later discovered, the real truth about Eliza's disappearance was far more chilling than anyone could have predicted. In the years following Eliza Moore's disappearance, life in Briarwood appeared to move on. Caleb, now remarried to Clara and raising 2 young children, was trying to put the past behind him. But the dark cloud of suspicion never fully lifted. He had rebuilt his life, but the unresolved mystery of Eliza's vanishing haunted him, lurking in the background of his every moment. The arrest came as a shock to everyone. It wasn't until 2023, nearly a decade after Eliza was declared dead, that a breakthrough in the case surfaced. The catalyst was an anonymous tip that led the police to a series of old documents hidden in a safe deposit box Caleb had once maintained under his name. Inside, investigators discovered evidence that Eliza had been involved in an elaborate plot to expose Caleb's role in a money laundering operation, a crime so serious that it warranted the most extreme action, her abduction and forced disappearance. As the investigation unfolded, Caleb's world began to crumble. He had never expected his carefully constructed life to be ripped apart by the secrets of his past. The authorities now had enough evidence to charge him with kidnapping, conspiracy, and money laundering, but it wasn't just his criminal activity that led to his arrest. The real shocker came when Eliza herself, having finally emerged from hiding, became the star witness against him. Eliza's return, though traumatic for her, was a turning point in the case. Her testimony was damning, providing first-hand accounts of the horror she endured during her years in captivity. She revealed that after discovering Caleb's criminal activities, she had been abducted by his associates, individuals who had been involved in laundering money through Caleb's business ventures. Eliza's attempt to confront Caleb with the truth had led to her being silenced, forced into hiding, and manipulated into keeping quiet about the life she once shared with him. The media had a field day with the arrest. The small-town tragedy became the focal point of national news. Journalists swarmed Briarwood, eager to report on the unbelievable turn of events. Headlines like, "Missing Wife Found Alive," and "She's Accusing Husband of Dark Crimes," and "Local Mechanic Arrested for Abduction and Money Laundering" dominated newspapers and news channels. The public's perception shifted drastically. Once seen as the tragic husband who lost his wife, Caleb was now viewed as a villain, someone capable of horrifying acts to protect his own secret. The courtroom drama that followed was nothing short of sensational. Caleb's defense attorneys, knowing the case was a tough one, mounted a strategy centered around discrediting Eliza's testimony. They argued that Eliza had been coerced into lying, suggesting that her years in hiding had made her mentally unstable. They painted her as a woman who had been manipulated by law enforcement and motivated by vengeance. They also cast doubt on her version of events, claiming that there was no solid proof that Caleb was involved in any illegal activity. Instead, they insisted that the money withdrawals and suspicious accounts could be explained by innocent business dealings that had been misinterpreted. But the prosecution, armed with overwhelming evidence, countered with a relentless assault on Caleb's character and actions. They presented wiretapped conversations, financial records, and witnesses who testified to Caleb's role in the money laundering operation. One key witness, a former associate of Caleb's, revealed the extent of the operation, detailing how Caleb had used his business to funnel illegal funds through a series of legitimate transactions. The prosecution also used Eliza's testimony to show how she had been forced into silence, isolated from the world, and controlled by Caleb's associates. As the trial went on, the courtroom became a battleground for public opinion. Caleb's former supporters, who had once believed his side of the story, now questioned his innocence. Many of his friends and family were torn between the man they had known and the evidence that painted him as a criminal mastermind. The emotional weight of the case hung heavily in the air, with moments of intense drama unfolding as the defense and prosecution clashed. Throughout the trial, Caleb maintained his innocence, insisting that he had never harmed Eliza and that any financial dealings were unrelated to criminal activity. However, the mounting evidence and the gravity of Eliza's testimony painted a different picture. The courtroom became a place of reckoning for Caleb, who found himself confronted not just by the law, but by the betrayal and secrets he had buried deep within his own past. As the trial reached its climax, a surprising twist came to light. New evidence emerged, showing that Caleb had attempted to reach out to Eliza in the years following her disappearance. In a series of letters and encrypted messages, Caleb expressed his remorse and begged for forgiveness, though he never acknowledged the criminal activities that had led to her abduction. This revelation added a layer of complexity to the case. Was Caleb truly remorseful, or was he simply trying to manipulate Eliza into forgiving him for his actions? Despite the defense's best efforts to cast doubt on the case, the jury found Caleb guilty of all charges. The verdict came down after a tense deliberation, with the weight of Eliza's testimony and the financial evidence proving too much to overcome. Caleb was sentenced to 25 years in prison, his empire crumbling as his darkest secrets were exposed for all to see. But for Eliza, the trial wasn't just about seeking justice for herself, it was about reclaiming her life. After years of living under false identities and in constant fear, she was finally free from Caleb's control. The trial marked the end of her long ordeal, and though the emotional scars would take time to heal, Eliza was determined to rebuild her life and move forward, without the shadow of Caleb's crimes hanging over her. The trial of Caleb Moore was nothing short of a media circus. Briarwood, once a peaceful town, now found itself at the center of a legal spectacle that had drawn the attention of the nation. The courtroom was packed every day with reporters, curious townsfolk, and the occasional celebrity lawyer, all eager to witness the downfall of the man who had once been the face of their tight-knit community. But the stakes were far higher than mere public interest. It was about truth, justice, and redemption for the woman who had been silenced for 10 long years. The first few days of the trial were marked by emotional testimonies from Eliza Moore. Sitting in the witness stand, her voice trembled but remained steady as she described the horror she had endured. The pain of being held captive, the fear of never seeing her children again, and the torment of living under a false identity all poured out in her testimony. She recounted the chilling moments when she first stumbled upon the evidence of Caleb's criminal activities. The betrayal she felt was palpable, and the jury could sense the anguish in every word she spoke. "I thought I knew the man I married," Eliza said, her voice shaking. "But I didn't. Not really. I was living with a stranger, someone capable of unimaginable things." Her testimony was not just a recounting of events but an emotional plea for justice. She spoke about the years of isolation, the psychological manipulation she had endured, and the loss of her own identity as Caleb's associates controlled her every move. The impact of her words was undeniable. The jury, already sympathetic to her plight, sat in rapt attention, each of them weighing the gravity of her testimony. The prosecution then presented a mountain of evidence. Financial records linked Caleb directly to a network of criminal transactions. A key witness, the former associate who had revealed the money laundering scheme, painted a detailed picture of how Caleb had used his business to funnel illicit funds. The witness testified that Caleb had been a central figure in a criminal organization that had been operating for years, using his mechanic shop as a front for money laundering and fraud. This testimony was pivotal in solidifying the case against Caleb, and it only further deepened the sense of betrayal felt by the public. Forensic evidence also played a crucial role in the trial. Phone records, which had been retrieved from Caleb's old devices, showed that Caleb had been in contact with several individuals who were later identified as members of the criminal network. There were messages between Caleb and these individuals discussing illegal transactions, hidden accounts, and plans to manipulate the legal system. These revelations left little room for doubt in the jury's mind about Caleb's involvement in the crimes. The defense, however, fought back with vigor. Caleb's legal team, knowing they were facing overwhelming evidence, attempted to cast doubt on the prosecution's case by questioning the credibility of Eliza's testimony. They argued that Eliza's memory had been distorted by her time in hiding. They suggested that she had been manipulated by law enforcement, and that her accusations were motivated by personal vendettas and a desire for vengeance. Caleb's defense attorney, a sharp, seasoned litigator, even attempted to discredit the forensic evidence, claiming that the financial records were inconclusive and could have been misinterpreted. The defense suggested that the money Caleb withdrew could have been for personal reasons unrelated to criminal activity. They also questioned the motivations of Caleb's former associate, accusing him of attempting to curry favor with the prosecution to secure a deal. But despite the defense's best efforts, the case against Caleb only grew stronger. The jury, though initially sympathetic to Caleb's calm demeanor and seemingly innocent exterior, could not ignore the weight of the evidence. Eliza's courage on the witness stand, coupled with the testimony of other witnesses and the hard evidence, painted a damning portrait of a man who had betrayed the very family he swore to protect. As the trial neared its conclusion, Caleb took the stand in his own defense. His testimony was emotionally charged, but it was clear to everyone in the room that his calm, almost detached demeanor did little to help his case. He denied any wrongdoing, insisting that he had been a devoted husband and father, and that the financial transactions had been part of a failed business venture, nothing more. His defense, however, seemed hollow, as if he were trying to convince himself as much as the jury. He repeatedly expressed regret for Eliza's disappearance but never took responsibility for the role he played in the events that led to it. When the jury began deliberating, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. Caleb sat quietly, his hands clenched in his lap, awaiting the inevitable verdict. His family, who had once stood by his side, now found themselves caught in the whirlwind of disbelief and disappointment. His children, who had once known him as their hero, watched in silence, unsure of what to make of the man who had given them their lives, and taken their mothers away. After several hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict. Caleb Moore was found guilty on all charges: kidnapping, conspiracy to commit money laundering, and fraud. The courtroom erupted in a mixture of relief and sadness as the judge read the verdict. Caleb's face, once calm, now appeared ashen, the weight of his actions sinking in. He had built his life on lies, and now, those lies had caught up with him. When the sentence was handed down, it was harsh: 25 years in prison. Caleb's world, once filled with promises of a peaceful family life, had crumbled. The man who had seemed so sure of himself, so controlled, was now a convicted criminal, facing the consequences of his actions. The reaction from the public was swift. While some expressed sympathy for Caleb's children, who were left to grapple with the fallout from their father's actions, others found little remorse for the man who had caused so much harm. Eliza, on the other hand, felt a sense of justice, though she knew that nothing could truly heal the wounds of the past. She had found the strength to rebuild her life, but the scars would remain. For Caleb, the verdict marked the beginning of a long, solitary journey in prison. His family, now shattered, struggled to move forward, each member carrying the weight of a past they could never forget. The public may have moved on to the next case, but for those involved, the pain and the consequences would linger long after the trial ended. Thank you so much for watching. We hope this story gave you insight into the shocking truths that can lurk beneath the surface of seemingly perfect lives. Eliza's journey from fear to freedom is a powerful reminder that nothing is ever quite what it seems, and sometimes, the truth takes years to come to light. If you found this story as gripping as we did, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more true crime stories. Your support helps us continue bringing these intense and thought-provoking tales to life. We love hearing from you, so let us know what you think in the comments section below. What are your thoughts on the case? Do you think Caleb deserved the verdict, or was there more to the story than we know? Also, tell us where you're watching from. It's always fascinating to see how far these stories travel, and we'd love to connect with our global audience. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who might find it as intriguing as you did. We'll see you in the next one.